if you don't mind, what I actually want to do is I want to go back just a little bit. We spoke yesterday about certain things, but I want to look at the this incredible thing that happens when Eliezer meets with Rivka, when he engages with her. What happens is, it says, once she's already said what she's going, what he wants her to do, and she says she gives him all the water that he wants, gives the camels all he wants, and then he actually says to her, "And who are you?" And I'm the daughter of Betuel, the son of Milcah, born to Nachor. And can you imagine that? How exciting he must have been, because here he knows exactly the person that is related to Avraham Avinu, and so it must be that this is absolute Ashkacha Pratis. And she said to him, not only that, we've got Gam Teven, Gam Ispor Ravi Manu, Gam Makom Lalun. There's lots of straw. We've got stuff to give to the animals, and also you can spend the night. And it's on that point that he says, "Vayikod ha'am vayishtachu l'Adonai." At that point in time, the Torah describes how vayikod ha'ish. Vayikod is it's a type of bowing. Vayishtachu l'Hashem, and he bows to Hashem. Vayomer, and he says, "Baruch Adonai Elohei Adoni Avram." Blessed be Hashem, the God of my master Avram, Asher lo azav chasdo ve'amito me'im Adoni, who never left his chesed for Hashem. Anochi baderech nachani Adonai beit achei Adoni. And he's just flowering this praise and more praise and more praise, and it's quite an amazing experience of praise that he does in praise and in gratitude and in thanks to our Kodesh Baruch Hu. Excuse me. On that, Rashi says that he said, one of the words that he says is Anochi baderech. I'm on the road. Nachani Adonai, Hashem guided me on that road. Beit Achi Adoni, to the house of my master's Beit Achi, of his brother. Rashi says there, what does it mean baderech? If you look at the word baderech, sometimes when we lane and we read the Torah, then it's so important that there are two things that people have to make a specific differentiation. The one is the ba, so that's the shva, and ba, between ba and ba, or la and la, because the word ba means, like ba derech means on the road, and ba derech means on a specific road. So here Rashi jumps onto the word ba derech, which means a specific road. What is the specific road? Derech hamazuman, the specific, the chosen road. Derech hayashar, the straight road. Ba'oto derech shayiti tarich, on that road that I needed to go, and that's the road that HaKadosh Baruch Hu guided me on, so that I could come to the right place. And that's why what he's saying, he's not saying that he took me on a road, but he's really took me on the road. And sometimes in our lives, we think we're just on a road. But in actual fact, if we understand that everything is in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's actually taken us on the road, on the Derech HaMezuman, on the Derech HaYashar, on the straight road, but Oto Derech Shayiti Tzarich, on the road that I need to go on. We make choices sometimes to go off of that road, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu keeps us on that road, and that's really what we're learning from Eliezer. Because if we weren't learning that from Eliezer, who is a Talmid of Avraham Avinu, then what are we learning from Eliezer? And that's really what the Mefarshim trying to understand. This whole story that's told of Eliezer has to teach us certain things. So perhaps that's one of the things that we can learn. But then it says, if you look at the Netziv, the Mikdavar, so he says that Vayikoda ish vayishtachu laHashem. What did he do? Vayikoda ish v'hainu kriya b'sha'a she'omer baruch. That is the kriya, that is the bowing at the time when you say Baruch. So now that's very strange. What is he talking about? It seems to be that what's happening right now is that as soon as Eliezer has completed his job, so to speak, to find this wife for Yitzchak, which he now believes he has, he can now engage in what he needs to do And that is the mitzvahs. What are the mitzvahs that he needs to do? He needs to daven. And how do you daven? How do we start our davening? So we start our davening, Baruch Atah Hashem. Baruch Atah Hashem, and at that point in time where we bow down. And the Netziv wants to say that we're learning once again. We don't learn that from anybody else. We learn this from Eliezer. And what does he say? He says, Vayomer Baruch Adonai Elohei Adoni Avraham. Obviously, you can't say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, because they're not around yet. That hasn't been established yet. But he can say Baruch Hashem Elokei Adoni Avraham. The Netziv points out that we learn here a very important idea. And what is that? Shemoidim al basora tova. Number one is that we learn that you have to give thanks on a basora tova, on good news. When we receive good news, what do we say? So what we should say is Baruch Hashem. That's where it comes from. Baruch Hashem Elokei Adonai Avram. Baruch Hashem. Thank Hashem. Blessed Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the source of the blessing, and I recognize that. But it's interesting that it's on this point that the Netziv actually points out in another one of his commentaries. He points out a very, very important question. It seems to be that from here we learn that we say thank you to Hashem. We acknowledge that when things happen, we moedim al basora tova. But his other commentary is called the Herchav Davar, and in the Herchav Davar he points out that when Yisro heard about what had happened with Bnei Israel, he also said Baruch Hashem, and on that point, Rashi points out that we learn that when to acknowledge the great Nisim from Yisro. So what comes along here is that the Netziv says, how can it be that I've just said anyway that we learn all these things from Eliezer, and it's so important to learn from Eliezer. How come we don't learn that? How come Bnei Israel didn't learn that from Eliezer at this point in time? To say, when good things happen, you thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that they had to learn to acknowledge the great miracles of happening of Yetziat Mitzrayim from Yitro much later on. And he makes a distinction between two types of miraculous events that in our lives are built up on what's called hashgacha pratis, right? This concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu constantly involved in our everyday lives. And in that hashgacha, in that space of hashgacha pratis, there are hidden miracles that constantly happen. There are hidden things that bring us into different places. And all of those things, when we recognize those things, that we say, wow, Baruch Hashem. That's very much according to what the commentaries explain. It says, Modim anachnu lach. In the Modim we say, Al nisecha shebachol yom imanu, or the miracles that are with us every day. Al niflaotecha shebachol eit erev avoker v'tzorayim, and all the niflaot that are with us, bachol eit, at every point in time, erev avoker v'tzorayim. What are the niflaot? Well, a nace is a nace. A nace is something that we can see. It's revealed. It's a sign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is playing this fundamental role in our lives. But a nifla is something we don't always recognize. And nifla is something that maybe 2-3 days later we have an aha moment. Oh my gosh, now I understand. One thing led to another. There were certain building blocks, but they're happening all the time. On the niflaot, on those things that are happening in our lives, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running our world and making sure every step of the way that we're on this derech and we maintain the derech. And sometimes even when we deviate off that derech, he pulls us back. On that, moedim al basora tova, that we learn from Eliezer. That's the thing that Eliezer taught us, that we need to know that Hashem is involved in our lives all the time. However, when it comes to revealed miracles, the revealed miracles of Yetziat Mitzrayim are not the same as these little things. These things of understanding Hashem's role in our everyday lives is very different from these massive miracles that will happen. The 6-day war, all the wars, all these things that are happening for us to become Bnei Israel, Am Yisrael, Medinat Israel, all the things that have happened throughout history. Those are great revealed miracles. On that, we learn to acknowledge those from Yitro. So there are two different types of acknowledgements. There's the modim, there's the gratitude that we have. That's when things go according to like al halichot hateva, according to the natural course of events. But then when there are these revealed miracles that come, that Hashem does this unbelievable thing, on those things we have to give a certain level, not only of hodaya, not only of gratitude, but incredible praise. And that's what we're learning at this point in time from these from that. And it's most noticeable, really, that it's clear that Eliezer went into a moment of tefillah, because we don't hear anything else that happens in the engagement, but rather it immediately says that after he's had this moment and he's everything, he leaves her, he doesn't engage with her anymore, and she runs and she goes and tells her mother's household everything that happens. Why does she run to her mother's household? So it's clear that all part of the hashgacha is part of the meeting of Eliezer with Rivka. She says to her mother, Rashi says very simply, he says, because derech hanashim haytaliyot lahem bait l'shay boy lemalachtan va'ena bat mageret ela la'ima, that there was a close relationship between the mother and the daughter, because there was a much more patriarchal society, so the daughters would hang out with their mothers, and the daughter tells everything to her mother. But then it says, Rivka ach shmo Lavan. Rivka also had a brother, and his name was Lavan. Vayarat Lavan ela ish hachutza ela ayin. And Lavan runs to outside up to the spring. And you have to ask your question: where did Lavan know about what was going on? We have this incredible moment of incredible hashgacha pratit, where there is that all these things start clicking together. And you see the holiness and the sanctity in that moment, and the recognition that it all comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how Hashem has guided his hands. And she runs to tell her mother, and Lavan's running is not to say, "Wow, that's amazing! Look what's happened. That my sister has brought this person into our home." What happens is, he runs. Rashi says, what's he running for? When you run towards something, you're excited. You want to do something there. You think he was excited about meeting this person, bringing him into his home. Amar Ashir Huze. You know why he ran? He ran because he saw all the gold and whatever, all these gifts that his sister had now on her arms. He said, "Oh, okay. I also want to be part of that." And so we can contrast the two expressions: the expression of unbelievable gratitude for HaKadosh Baruch Hu putting him into a certain thing, because that's the desire, is to connect to Hashem. And on the other hand, is this running towards the material, running towards the prize that he can get because he's part of the family. And that's part of the learning that we have to understand. What should we be running to? What should we be acknowledging? Ultimately, we've got to acknowledge the miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, the hodaya, the praise, the thanks, all of those things. And in that way, we differentiate ourselves from the Lavan type, and we make ourselves, even though Eliezer, and remember where he comes from. Eliezer is from Damascus, he's from Damascus. He's part of the Canaanim, but nonetheless, he had grown to such an extent that he was able to recognize Baruch Hashem. Everything came from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So to we who come from that within our very DNA, we have to decide and make that movement away from the way of Lavan. Not that everyone is chad lila v'chas, but away from the way of Lavan and towards the way of Eliezer, even though he's just simply the Eved of Abraham. Let's stop.